Hello and welcome to my Fire Emblem Engage class tier list. So in this video, I'm going to be breaking down all of the classes based on my experience with them. Some of these might move up or down as I play the game more, but this is after 2 Maddening runs, and I'm on Chapter 8 in my 3rd Maddening run. I've been testing out different classes, different setups, trying out different team comps. So to begin, we have Successor. This is Diamant's unique. This is exclusive to him. He does get decent stats on this. The passive is okay. It's definitely better than some passives. It's not the best though. I would say this is probably like a B tier, maybe an A tier, somewhere around here. I'll put it in B. I don't feel very confident that it's a high A tier build. But like, it's nice that he has a unique passive, but it's not a passive that deals damage or does something huge. So I'm not like a huge fan of that. Next we have Cupido. This one, I didn't really have good luck with this on my first run. I'm going to put it in B. I don't really think it's that good, personally. Bows are good because they shoot down flyers. There's other ways of shooting down flyers. Wormslayer sword is really good against like wyverns. Magic is really good against wyverns, so you don't always need a bow. Like, bow is really only effective against like Falcon Knights, and everything else you can hit with magic or Wormslayer. So like bows aren't mandatory. There's also anti-air magic that's pretty effective, like Excalibur. So I know a lot of people swear by bows. I do run them. I run like maybe 1 or 2 bow units, or units that at least have access to bows, but I don't think Cupido's super good. Next we have Alfred's Avenir class. I'm going to put this in B. It's basically like Paladin with slightly worse stats, and its passive can make him randomly tanky, which is kind of good, I guess. It's not really game breaking or going to blow my mind, but it's okay. There's some spoilers on some of these, so I'm just going to warn you now. All right, so next we have Vale. Her class, the Fell Child, it doesn't have a promotion. It's considered an advanced class. It's like Thief, and then it hits like level 40 cap, and she starts out, I think, level 35. So she levels up 5 times, then you have to second seal her back into this class. Honestly, I think this is like lower end of B tier. One thing I've learned recently about Vale is if you just reclass her on Mage Knight, she gets like plus 5 to 6 speed. And she gets, I think, either the same magic or slightly more magic. It's one of those. It might be a point less. But reclassing her into Sage or Mage Knight makes her faster. And if you can get Speed Plus on her or Speed Taker, she can reliably double. And hitting harder and reliably doubling is better than not doing that. So honestly, I'd rather her be on Mage Knight or something else. Vidam, I would put this in A. This is Salene's. This one's decent because it has a passive that, even though it only averages to like 25 to 35% chance to occur per hit, it still happens enough that it just randomly gives you extra damage, and it's nice. So I'd say solid A tier. I have no idea how to say Alchrist. It's like tier D elite or something. It's like French. I don't speak French, so we'll just call it elite archer. We'll call it elite bowman. I would say this is probably up there. It's potentially S tier because he has like 70% dex growth, and that's a lot of dex. That's 7 points of dex per 10 levels on fixed growth. So you combine that with the fact that he can ignore half of the opponent's res or defense when shooting them almost half of the time. That's pretty substantial. And on Brave Bow, especially when he can quad reliably, he becomes insane. So I would say it's like high A tier. I wouldn't call it S though. Dancer, easy S tier. Extremely broken. Buffs your units while refreshing them. AoE heals in the start of each turn. Can also equip a passive that makes it so he heals after he waits. So you get double heals. You get so you get the passive healing, you get the stat increase. You can put Canter plus on him pretty easily because he has nothing else to spend TP on. Or I'm sorry, SP. So pretty broken. Chimera. She's at least in high A. I'm tempted to put her into S tier. Definitely below the Dancer. Maybe like low S tier, I would say. I think that's fair. The reason for this is Sandstorm, when used correctly, if you just like use her as like one of your main damage units, she will power level and she will start her Sandstorm will start out damaging her crits. And when that happens, you can use like Brave Lance +3 or Brave Lance +5 and just run around and one round things with basically a 93% chance for Sandstorm to trigger once, and that's usually enough to kill. I also want to try. I ran Sigurd on her, and that was decent. But I want to try some different things on her Picket class. But I think it's like low S tier because it's very powerful. It never fell off. On my first run, I used her, but I didn't invest in her that much, so she didn't turn out very well. But she was just underleveled, so that's not really her being bad. It's more of just I wasn't using her correctly. But once I used her Sandstorm build correctly, she's actually very strong. Ivy, I would say, is like medium S tier. She's really good in general, and she's a flying mage, which is something that is unique to her and Hortensia. But she has really high defensive stats, and she has decent speed, so she usually doesn't get doubled. She often can double enemies, and she's very tanky, weirdly. Like, she has like 20 defense starting or something insane, which is very high, and on top of not getting doubled, she's almost like a tank. So with good positioning, she's just very tough. She hits hard. Void Grasp is useful. It's extra damage. So she has a lot going on for her, and she's also a flyer. And she's one of the units you can easily break the game with Lucina, Bond Shield, and Flyer Squad. So Hortensia, I would say, is low S tier. So she gets extra spell uses, or I'm sorry, staff uses, and she can essentially make it so that your staves have 20 to 30% more uses because of her passive. It allows you to save a use based on your dex level. So if you have 30 dex on her, you have a 30% chance to not use like a warp, which is nice because that's like 1 to 2 extra warps out of 5. So pretty huge upside. She's also a flyer with magic, which is good. She doesn't have as much damage output as Ivy, but she has enough damage that she contributes to damage and can kill things, and she can typically one-round enemy armor, or at least put a ton of damage on it, while also being a really good utility unit. But I would say she's like low S. This is Thief. Thief, it's definitely at least A. It's either high A or low S. So Thief, I'll put it in low S. Thief is really good because of its high speed and its really high avoid rates. It does have problems with enemies with high armor, generally speaking, so it can't really do anything to them. It doesn't have like magical daggers to bypass that, which would be probably overpowered if they did have that, because then they could do everything. But against everything else, they tend to one-round a lot of things, or at least deal good damage while dodging, and they also have dodge tanking utility. So in that way, they're pretty solid. Okay, this next one, I think this is High Priest, yeah. So High Priest, I would say, is like high B tier. It's not bad. It's good for luck generation, like for getting tons of luck on Ana, but it has worse offensive stats than Sage. And overall, I would say it's just strong. Like, maybe like low A, high B. But if I had to choose between this, Sage, or Mage Knight, I would never pick this. So, in my opinion, it's B tier. This one, I don't recognize some of these icons because you don't see these. All right, Martial Master. All right, this one, I'm going to put in C tier. I don't see the upside. You basically can punch things and heal. Maybe there's some use case where this is good on certain units. I don't see the upside of it because, I mean, I get that you get Brave Weapon on it, and if you get your stats up enough, it can be decent, but all of the good combat arts are relatively heavy. So maybe a unit that has really high magic stat and strength stat and high magic and strength growth can make use of this, but I don't see the upside. It is nice to have healing and damage, but I would rather have a High Priest because it also has tomes. Like, High Priest has everything this class does and even similar base stats, but it also has tomes, so I just don't see the upside of this. Chain Guard is whatever. I don't care for it. I don't find it very useful. Allowing your units to tank an extra hit on Maddening usually doesn't make or break a position. The enemy density tends to be so high that barely matters, and then it's always annoying healing the Chain Guarder. A lot of people mention you can use specific emblem rings to mitigate this problem to heal over time, but that's like 20, that's at least 10 to 30 minutes of RNG abuse to exploit the rings you need. And if that's what it takes to make something viable, I'll skip it. I'm not doing that. You can do that, and then maybe it bumps it up a bit, but I'm not doing that. All right, Mage Knight, I would say is low A tier. It seems good. From what I've used of it, it has good speed and it has good mobility. So there's really not that many downsides to it. It doesn't have, I think it has like slightly worse stats in some ways than Sage. So, all right, so Mage Knight. So it has 5% less magic than Sage. It has 5% less dex, 5% less res, 10% less luck. It also has 5% more HP and strength. And it also does give you plus 5% speed. So of Sage and Mage Knight, I would say you want to use Mage Knight for like slightly more speed. It also has higher base speed, and you want to use Sage for damage, like just raw damage, if speed is less of an issue. But Mage Knight actually might be better because it has higher build and higher mobility. But that being said, we're on to Sage. Sage is good. Honestly, I think Mage Knight actually might be better because of the speed. Speed is very important, and having an extra 2 to 3 points of speed and more build on top of that means you can wield heavier tomes without as much penalty, and the higher speed means you're doubling more. So Mage Knight might just be straight up better than Sage. Compared to these, though, I think she's down here. I think this is better than this. For sure. A lot of people use Levin's Sword on her. I've been trying it out. It's not blowing me away. We'll see. But yeah, I'm not a fan so far. All right, Wyvern Knight, I would say is low S tier. I would say it's a little bit better than Thief because of Bond Shield strats. The thing with Bond Shield is on Wyvern and Griffin, you're fast enough to never get doubled by pretty much anything except for like certain rare enemy swordmasters that are like near the end of the game. So your tanking ability is better than a Thief because you can guarantee it for so many turns. So it's just literally better, and your counterattack damage is usually higher. So if you're fighting things that are as fast as you on a Thief, your single hit damage is not that high. Whereas if you're counterattacking with a sword or a lance, your counterattack damage is much higher. So I'd rather use those for like a bonded shield strat. And I do think that kind of is better than these. Probably better than Hortensia, and that because of the flying mobility is huge. But this is more damage than that, so this is more of a utility. But I would say it's like S tier. Griffin, I would say these are the same, even though I placed this higher. I'd say these are about the same. Depends on what you need more, but this has weapon flexibility, this has utility. That's the difference. And slightly more speed and luck, whereas this has more strength, and this has more magic. So there's definitely trade-offs. Both are very strong. Wolf Knight, I'll put high A tier. It's pretty good, but it tends to be on units with bad strength growth. It doesn't provide much strength growth itself. It's like 5% extra. So if you're on a unit that has like 30% strength growth, 35% strength growth, you're really not getting that huge value that you might need. But you do get a ton of speed and high base speed plus good mobility. So it's still totally viable and pretty solid. Okay, so some of these look kind of similar. Luckily, I named all of these down here. All right, that's not Bow Knight. This one is Paladin. Okay, so this is Paladin. Paladin, I would say probably like around Wolf Knight. It's pretty solid. It has good bases. It has decent growths. It has plus 15% speed, strength, health, defense, and res, which is pretty good. Plus 10% luck growth. So the plus 15 speed and strength is viable, and you can pick your weapon type. You don't get staves, but it's pretty decent. All right, so next we have Great Knight. So Great Knight, I'm not a fan of. I'm going to put it kind of like here. I think it's like B tier. I think it has basically no upside, right? So the whole thing about Great Knight is that it's supposed to be a high defense knight, and its base defense is only slightly higher than units like Chimera, units like Ivy, and these aren't even tanks. So when you hand me something that's supposed to be really good at tanking, and it's like slightly higher defense than things that aren't even tanks, it's not really going to blow me away. And on top of that, it has bad base speed and no speed modifiers. So let's see. I have the stats over here. Great Knight. Yeah, it has no speed modifier. It has strength plus 15, which is okay. Some defense plus 25%, build plus 5. I don't think it's very good. And it's not really that good at tanking. And it also has two weaknesses. It has armor weakness and horse weakness. So if you're trying to tank, you now have two things to watch out for instead of one. Well, also weak to mage. So really three weaknesses. And then if it's on a Lear, you have four, because that's also now weak to dragons. So it's basically not very good. All right, general. General. I would say, maybe low A or high B, because it has speed problems and it has positioning problems. I'll put it in high B. I know some people use these in endgame and they quote unquote plug holes with it. And I understand what that is and what it entails. Like, I understand why people use them. But I think a thief is just better because it has higher mobility and it has high speed, so it avoids getting doubled and it's not weak to mages. Whereas if a mage just looks at one of these things, it's going to double it and it's usually going to one round it. So when you block a front with a general, if you get caught by a mage, you're basically dead. And there's very little you can do about it because you have terrible mobility and very low res. So I would rather have a bonded shield strat, a picket. Like, picket is actually has pretty high defensive growth, and she ends up being very tanky, and her high speed prevents her from getting doubled. So not only does she deal like really good damage and has very few downsides, she's reasonably tanky to mages, and she won't get doubled. So like, you have high speed, decent res, and high defense to the point where she can tank a lot, like three to four physical enemies by herself, while like with getting hit, not avoiding them. And I would say that's a little bit better than a thief because I think her damage output on a brave spear with sandstorm out damages most thieves, if not all thieves. The only thing that could be a contender is like a crit build, and even then, there's probably some setup involved. Okay. What is this, Bow Knight? Yeah, Bow Knight. Okay, Bow Knight. Bow Knight, it's definitely better than general. I would say like high A tier, or sorry, high B tier. So it does have this hit plus 40 passive that's kind of nice, that really only, in my opinion, exists to shoot really fast enemies that have high dodge rates, like Pegasus Knights and Falcon Knights. The Wyverns tend to be lower speed and not as dodgy, but the actual Falcon Knights tend to be Griffin Knights tend to be very dodgy and hard to hit. So this helps when they're pushing you and you just sit there and you just get hit plus 40. Outside of that, it also gets access to, I think, either spears, or no, I think it's always just spears and bows, isn't it? It's either just spears and bows, or it's bows plus sword, or bow plus axe. But it might just be spears and bows. But either way, you get access to different weapons. And in my experience, when I have a unit that's using bows, and then I have them use multiple weapons, it usually doesn't. They're usually not too impressive on those other weapons. And the plus 40 hit is kind of situational. You can't push because you have to sit still, shoot, and then you can move. But if you move and shoot, you lose your hit advantage. So that's really like the main upside. Otherwise, you're probably just better off being on a warrior, which is kind of like a bow knight. Okay, sniper. What do I think about sniper? Um, Maybe like low A tier because of the crits. Yeah, I'll give it. I'll give the crit people some love because I know people get mad at me when I'm not like going nuts about crits. So this gives you plus 10. Their passive gives you plus 10 crit if you hit a dude who can't hit you back. So if you run like a killer bow plus crit modifiers, you could reasonably kill a bunch of things. Now it requires a lot of investment and a lot of setup, whereas like some of these classes just out of the gate just start working. Like these are just always good. You know, you just hand them a tome when they start killing things, even without upgrades. Paladin, same thing, just starts killing things. He hits Luna really fast, starts killing things, and so on. But I would say sniper on a crit build could be like low A tier. I think that's fair. Okay, and then we have this one should be warrior. Just double checking. Yeah, that's warrior. Okay, so very similar. I would say warrior is like low A tier for longbow, like chain attacks, is like those are nice. The fact that it can hit hard with axes if you have like a nice accurate engraved axe, or use crit axes and then also use bows to shoot down flyers gives it some flexibility. And overall, its base stats are decent. They tend not to be very fast though, but when they hit hard, and you can always give them, like a heavy hitting weapon that you don't expect to follow up with. I've been hearing that Hector's emblem ring allows you to do follow-ups regardless, so you could probably use it on them, like use that on these units and other slower units too. But I don't run the DLC, so I don't really have an opinion on that. But the longbow is nice with this because it allows the warrior to have reach with its follow-up attacks. And you could also run the DLC Wind God effect, which increases your range by 1 more. So you could have effectively 3 range chain attacks, which is pretty nice. So you get decent damage, you get 2 useful weapon types, you get decent base stats. It doesn't have the most speed, but it can shoot down flyers, which usually get 1 shot anyways, and it can also, be an axe unit. So it's kind of like a good hybrid class. Berserker, I would say overall, probably maybe lower A tier. So you run crit builds on these, or you run Hector apparently for the guaranteed follow-up. But it's solid. You go for the crits, and you just one-shot things. That's the idea behind Berserker. It also has 30% speed growth, strength growth, and I believe plus 10 build. Yeah, Berserker plus 10 build, plus 30% strength, plus 10 speed. So it's pretty good actually. Like it's even good on units who have 40, 50 speed. You could potentially be a fast Berserker with enough build to naturally follow up without using emblem rings and DLC. So potentially it could be S tier on certain units. Depends on how you build it. This one, I think that's Royal Knight. Royal Knight and Paladin look very similar. Yeah, that's Royal Knight. Royal Knight has this weird reforge ability I don't care for, and it has access to staves, which is kind of nice. Its speed is a little bit lower than Paladin's. So let's actually look at its modifiers really quick. So Royal Knight, speed modifier 15, strength of 10, magic of 15. So it's definitely a little bit more magic oriented. The class that you first get who's on this by default is Mavier, and he has a flame lance. So it's kind of almost like a mage horse class. So you use spears, but you can use flame lance, I guess, if you want, and use staves. I would say it's B tier. Here. It's not, I would say general is a little bit better. It's not blowing me away. All right, I believe this one's hero because these look almost exactly the same. All right, it is hero. Or no, this is halberdier. Halberdier. I'm going to say slightly better than thief. S tier. So halberdier is good because you can take any unit who has terrible speed, and assuming they have high strength growth, you can allow them to double by parking another unit on the other side of the enemy you're attacking. So it works really well with dive units like flyers who are flexible or thieves who have pass, so that you can hit something, canto behind an enemy after hitting and killing something or setting up a kill, and then your halberdier can double any full health enemy. They don't have to be at full health, but it's great to do this against full health enemies because they have guaranteed doubling because of their pincer attack, which unlocks at level 5. And what this allows you to do is get guaranteed quads on a brave or get guaranteed doubles on a ridiculously heavy weapon. So you can throw, the weight plus 15 damage plus 3, might plus 3 engraving. I think that's Ike's. It's something like that. It's really high weight and then plus 3 might. And it doesn't matter. You'll still double it. You'll just get the benefits. You can upgrade. You can use the heaviest weapon you want. You literally can ignore weight completely. You can run a silver lance plus whatever with Ike on it, and you will probably one round most things. However, the reason why I don't put it higher is because it does have the setup cost of another unit being on the other side. So that is a consideration. It's not free. It seems free, but Sometimes that means compromising a position. Sometimes that means playing suboptimally to account for the halberdier. But if you have good dive units who can tank a hit, then they can play off each other. Honestly, I'd rather have Tamara just running in and sandstorming because then she can canter out. Whereas if I'm going to be using a halberdier, the other unit has to commit to the position. That's a key thing that I'm not seeing people talk about. A lot of people are like, oh, it's just pure upside. It is not pure upside. Hard committing a unit to a position is a risk. So it is really strong. Potential, not game breaking, it's just really strong. But you need to commit that unit, and that's why I say lower S tier. Okay. Hero. Hero gets the chain, the 2 times chain attack thing at full health, Brave Assault, Brave Assist, whatever. It has decent bases, some speed growth. It's not bad. As a lot of people pointed out, it has negative drip, which I don't use the term drip. I'm using that ironically. But it has negative drip. So the Brave Assist thing, I'm not sure how I feel about Brave Assist spam, to be honest. I think there's some problems with it. I'll say low A tier. I think that's fair. Yeah, because you have 2 weapon types, so you have some flexibility. You have decent bases, some stats. The Brave Assist thing, it can be a problem if you like level up and get +1 health. Now you no longer trigger it and you need to get healed for 1. So that's a problem. There's also the problem of just getting hit. There's also the problem of the fact that you need to commit your team positionally in order to get these chain attacks off. Whereas when you run units like these that have canter, they get in and out, or they get in, reposition out of bounds. Like that's why flyers are so good with canter. They can get in, kill stuff, reposition out of bounds, reposition over trees, reposition behind pillars, all this stuff, and use the terrain to reduce enemies' access to them. Whereas with heroes and chain attack archetype team comps, your major problem is that all of your units are ground based. Like there is no backup that flies, because then it'd be a flyer, not a backup unit. So your fundamental problem is when you commit to chain attack spam, you commit your entire army or big chunks of your army positionally to that chain attack spam. And yes, it's cool to see a bunch of chain attacks pop off, but most units, when built correctly, will just simply 1-round units without chain attack help. So it's completely irrelevant, like at high levels of play, I would say, for Maddening. But you can do it, you can use it, it is viable, and it's kind of fun. So I totally get why you'd want to run chain attack spam, but it's kind of fun. So, if you enjoy it, it's not bad though. It's not like B tier. It's definitely like at least low A. But, you have to commit to the position. There's so many stupid things that can cause you to lose health that, if you're not at max health, like just basic combat, right? Like late game, a lot of enemies have 1/2 range weapons, like spears and stuff and tomahawks and dumb things like this. So when you have your hero go and hit something, if it has a tome, if it has a tomahawk, if it has a levin sword, if it has a flame lance, like half the weapons enemies have 1 and 2 range. So when your hero goes and hits something, it usually gets counterattacked and then loses its brave assist. So that's a huge counter argument against like the upside of it. So, and they don't have access to bows, so they can't poke things at 3 range with a longbow like the warrior can. But the warrior, you don't care about having max health or not. You can take some chip damage, it doesn't matter. But on hero, if you want to get the big value, you really want to not be getting counterattacked and losing health, because the entire point of your build is brave assist. All right, next we have Swordmaster. Probably low S tier. It's really fast. It has really good speed. Plus 20 speed growth, plus 10 strength, plus 15 dex. It's decent. Or maybe it's not low S tier. Let me think about this. I might be thinking of 3 houses where it gives increased crit rate. Oh, no. I do think it is low S tier, because it does have this ability that lets you move on the other side of an enemy. So you can move 5 tiles, and let's assume you're running like a crit build or something, or some crazy hyper-aggressive build. You move 5 tiles, attack them, and use their repositioning ability to attack them and then switch to the other side of them. That gives you 7 tiles of movement. And then if you have canter as well, you get 9 tiles of movement. That is really good for hit and run tactics, for repositioning. Let's say there's 3 enemies behind you and 1 enemy like in front of you. You attack the 1 enemy in front of you, reposition behind it, canter 2, and now you've displaced those 3 enemies behind you. So you can do positional gimmicks like that, And that is huge upside in a game like this, where like Kanto has been removed and positioning is a serious problem. So just for the mobility and the fact that it has decent bases and overall decent stats and very fast, like very high speed, like if you throw Kagetsu on this, he'll carry. Kagetsu on anything carries, but the units that do well in this class tend to be insane. But obviously there are units you throw on Swordmaster that are terrible, so it comes with like an asterisk, I would say. Okay, finally, we have, what is this, Divine Dragon? Yeah, Divine Dragon. Divine Dragon, I would say, is kind of like A tier. I would place it, I guess, like here. So it gives you access to abilities, like extra things. Like it basically gives you access to selection on certain emblem rings, right? Where you get like additional upside. Some emblem rings, I would say, are actually better on other classes. Like Lucina is so clearly better on a flyer that it doesn't really make sense to be a Divine Dragon. Like Divine Dragon, Lucina, you get 90%, everyone near you gets 90% chance to block the first hit, whereas if you're on a flyer, all other flyers have 100% chance to block the first hit, and flyers have very few downsides, if any, so it's just way better. So if you run Lucina, that's like huge. I know some people love Corrin, and they use Corrin. I get the use case. I understand why people value it. I personally don't think it's super useful to have access to all these different tile manipulation abilities. Corrin, I would say you just want it on an ice or a fire and you're fine, because then you can just delay. That's really all you need it for. Tanking, there's like things that increase defense and heal and all this other stuff. I mean, there's always Great Sacrifice, so that's a better option for healing. Like there's other tools that do everything Corrin does, right? So I would rather have another flying unit who can one round most things than another grounded unit who now has to play around water, trees, fire tiles, ice. Well, I mean, everyone has to play around ice tiles, but like, you know, cliffs, walls, all this stuff. So like flyers just be like, oh, that's a nice wall, I'm gonna fly right over it. Like they literally invented a new tile type, impassable, for flyers to try to nerf them, and even so, they're still like basically the meta game, in my opinion. But it's hard to refute that they're not good. At the very least, they're very strong. But I think they're like some of the best units in the game. All right, so here's the list. I guess no one really goes into D tier. Let me know if you agree or disagree and why. But I don't really think... I mean, maybe Swordmaster can move down to A tier. Maybe it's just Kagetsu that I'm thinking of. That's like so insane. Someone was making the argument that Halberdier is better than Chimera, but Chimera doesn't need a second unit to set up her doubling. She's just very fast. Very fast, high defense, high dex, which also translates to high accuracy. So she literally will never miss. Like when I use her, she always has a 100% hit rate. And she's very tanky, and she's very fast. So really strong unit. Very few, if any, downsides. She's also a land unit. So if you throw Sigurd on her and just go like double down on like dex and speed, she becomes absolutely insane. And you could always have her use Flame Lance if you want her to hit armor, and she could still deal reasonable damage. Alternatively, she can Brave Lance like enemy armor and still trigger like 1 to 2 sandstorms and hit through it and put it down to like, you know, from full health to 20 to 30% with like 1 or 2 sandstorm triggers. Like even when she hits zeros, the sandstorm still boosts her damage up enough. So yeah, she's a really strong unit. And the dex also does scale her crits, so she on average has like, I don't know, 10 to 25% crit rate. And when you like translate that out over 4 hits on a quad, you know, or on a brave weapon, it does basically equal a pretty, like, you know, like almost like a 50-60% chance to happen once. And crit sandstorms hit very hard. Sandstorm and crits can happen at the same time, and that damage is ridiculous. If you get a sandstorm crit, it will one-shot something. They tend to deal like 87 to 200 damage. That was the highest I've seen. So yeah, so absolutely crazy. Halberdier can't do that. It can crit, but it's not as tanky as Picket, and it's not as fast. And the best use case of Halberdier kind of has you, using other units and potentially positioning other units in a way that's not very good or even dangerous. Whereas with Pickett, she can dive into groups of enemies as long as they're like physical. And even to some degree, like if there's a mage, she can usually tank it. And she can literally just push by herself on a flank and just start killing a bunch of things and holding. Like she's a tank DPS that's fast. Like she's really good. Potentially even better than the flyers. But if the only thing I would say these have on her is flying. Aside from that, she has like no downsides. Some people say her strength is low, but you really want to dive into the Sandstorm and get her decks up, and then she'll be great, and she'll be a hard carry. So, yeah, that's it for this one. Definitely like and subscribe. I don't really think I want to move any of these after looking at them. I think a lot of these are fine. Sniper, honestly, I'm giving this one to the people who are all about crits. I'm not so sure that it on a crit build is like insane. I'm just like kind of assuming it would be A tier. If not for a crit build, I'd put this at like mid B tier. And then these are just like decent backups, like these 3 unit types. Oh yeah, the other thing about Halberdier is it is a backup, but so is Pickett. So I think this is the best backup in the game, like by a huge margin. I think this is the best backup unit. It has everything. It has speed, damage, defense, decent health pool, high accuracy, and you have access to other weapons too. So you don't have to just use, Brave Lance. You could just go for double. You could get a Silver Spear upgraded to +3 or +5, and hand that to her with an engraving, and she would pop off. Her Sandstorm rate would be, with doubling, I don't know, like 75% or something. That's at 50% dex, or 50 dex, so like 45, maybe it's like 70% to trigger a Sandstorm with doubling, which is still pretty high. And with the higher base damage on the weapon, because the might is factored in, you'd be hitting very hard if you triggered a Sandstorm on a higher might weapon. She can also, another reason she's good with Sigurd is when you do override, it can trigger per individual enemy. So I've overridden 5 enemies before, and it triggers on 3 of them, and it kills some of them or puts them at like very low health. So pretty huge, pretty good unit, very solid. Kind of slept on right now, but yeah, that's it for this one. Definitely like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.